Hello and welcome to A Bunch of Therapists with me, Michaela McCarthy.
And me, Dipti Solanki. We'll be bringing you stories and insights from inside the therapy room. This week, we have Simon, someone who you've known for quite
a long
while.
time.
Yeah,
I've known him a long time. And when he went in to train as a therapist, there wasn't so many men working as therapists. And he'll talk about how men need a space to be able to speak.
Yeah. It's quite emotional, actually, listening to him describe the ways in which men need spaces like that and what could be a consequence of them not having spaces like that to open up in and to connect. So hopefully there'll be men, but also women and all genders who will take something from that in by way of understanding each other and how we show up in the world and how we can do that in a more compassionate way.
Mm-hmm. Hi Simon, so thanks for coming on A Bunch of Therapists. So Simon, where were you in your life? What was your background? What was your story a bit, before training as a therapist? Because not all therapists just go and train as a therapist.
Yeah, no, I think if you'd met me sort of 40 years ago when I was in the midst of my advertising career and said, at 61 I'll be a therapist, I'd probably imagine that was quite unlikely to happen. I'd think that was pretty far-fetched.
Yeah. So how are you different from now and going back working in advertising?
Well, I guess it was just that, at that time I was so stuck in what I was doing and I was so kind of, I was so unaware of all the patterns that I had. And it was only really when I had a kind of major crisis myself that I found my way into therapy as a result of that, which was really a sort of collision of a whole bunch of stuff.
How did you get into advertising?
Well, as a kid, I was always into art and that was my thing. That was my kind of magic power.
What kind of art?
Well, I just loved painting and drawing, really, as a kid. And then as I got older, I sort of, I did A-level art and it was clear that I was probably going to go down the route of some sort of creative route. And I just loved it. It was my passion, really. And it was something I was confident in myself at, where I really wasn't academically. And I think that was, we might get onto this, but I think I was probably much more ADHD than I realised. So my skills were much more in that kind of creative direction. And but actually I was brighter than I thought. But because I was not suited for a school structure, I did pretty badly. And my mum particularly and the teachers were very critical of me. So I think I had very low confidence.
Well, that's happened a lot with people where they had ADHD or undiagnosed ADHD, because it's not that people are stupid. It's just that they have different skill sets. And sitting in sort of the way we have education now in this sort of structured sort of environment, it doesn't really suit everybody.
Yeah, it didn't suit me at all.
Yeah.
And so I think I had really low confidence, but art was my thing, and that was where I got all my kind of esteem. And so I went to art college, and it looked like I was sort of headed towards a career in advertising or something like that. I think that was more by necessity, that I wanted to make a living rather than be a starving artist living in a garret in Paris. So I sort of thought, right, how can I commodify this talent, I suppose. And I found it quite difficult when I left art college and I sort of entered the real world. But I sort of bumbled along and just about managed to get through the first few years. And then I think my confidence grew a bit, and I worked for a number of different companies. I set up my own business as a sort of graphic design consultancy, just very small, but we did really well. And I think that was when I was in my sort of prime creatively, because I was very confident in what I was doing, and we did well. We won a lot of business, and I think I really enjoyed being sort of captain of my own ship. I sort of felt like that was the right place for me. I didn't really thrive in structured environments back to the ADHD, I guess. I found that quite difficult, and my way of working was very sort of maverick. So I didn't fit into teams very well. So when I had my own little concern and there was just me and a partner and then a couple of people working under us, it was great. You know, I could sort of run the show. And so I think that was sort of where it really, around that time, mid-30s was sort of high point for me in that. But I was just beginning, if I reflect on it now, I guess to sort of, I think the competitive nature in me sort of came out in a really unhealthy way.
Say more
around
about
that time.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing that I was very good at, apart from art, was sport, and that was another place where I sort of felt at home and confident. I think when I was on the football pitch or on running or playing tennis
Any
or something,
sport.
I was really confident, and so, but also of course that implies competition, and I was really competitive, and I think that came from a pretty broken place in me when I reflect on it. It was I think it was a lot to do with the way that particularly my mother was very conditional about the way she loved me and my
So
sister.
you had to succeed.
So winning was like essential. I also think that's in my ancestry, because I've realised that Jewish ancestry has got a fiercely competitive side to it, which is just about survival.
About survival,
It's just about kind of brute survival at any cost. So I had this sort of weird thing where if I lost pitches or I lost sporting encounters, it sort of felt like life or death in a weird way. I mean, that sounds dramatic, but I think I sort of saw it as, if I lose, I am kind of nothing. I mean,
Gosh, that's quite powerful though. If you think about it, you can't win everything. You just can't have all the sweets in the shop. And sometimes you're not meant to.
Yeah.
You don't know until after. But that also can be a bit of an ADHD trait, that you take everything so literally as a complete rejection.
Yeah. That's right.
But then you have your mum, did she have really high standards?
She was a super successful woman. She's a real trailblazer. Very, at a time when it was unusual for women to be, leading lights in their field. She was an academic. She worked in the sort of neuropathology field. So she was working with diseases of the peripheral nervous system.
Okay.
And she was traveling around the world lecturing, writing papers, and I could tell for her that success was everything.
What was your relationship like with Mum?
It was, I mean, I look back on it now, and she was not. I think she would probably have said it herself. She's still alive, but she's very old now. But I think she would probably say she wasn't the greatest mum, and I think I was desperate to please her, and I think we all felt, my family felt quite abandoned by her, because she spent much more time kind of looking after her career than she did us.
Well, I imagine she got a lot of praise and
she got a lot of esteem from that herself. She'd had very traumatic history, so I can see how that all kind of fed into the story, and so she kind of left us. But when she was around, the way in which she would actually make me feel good about myself was that she would be very praiseful of when I did things well, and very critical when I didn't. So
it was very black and white.
So it's very black and white. So it's not hard to see how that kind of belief system arose in me. And so, I became really competitive. And then I think, just going back to the advertising world, I mean, that world thrives on people who are competitive. But I think it often thrives on people whose competition or competitive nature comes from quite a broken place.
Right.
Because I look back, and I've actually worked with quite a few people from that world since, and you can see, I mean, this is kind of neurotic, pathological competition.
But it's very hard, if you think competition, if you're not kind of driven in that way for competition, whatever that is, in business or sport or whatever it is, that you're not going to be very good at the competition, because there's no reason for you to be competitive. You know, there isn't something from childhood saying you need to win.
That's right. Yeah.
You know,
it comes from somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, it's sort of like you don't get any like prizes for coming second.
That's right. Yeah. And in the advertising world, it is like that. It is.
Bit
You can go
cutthroat.
from hero to zero in the agency if you win a pitch. I remember these times very well, where if I was leading a pitch, because eventually I got kind of hired by an agency, and I left that business, and that was the point at which I think it got too much for me. So I was the creative director of a sort of small, medium-sized agency in the West End, and if we won a pitch, it was to the pub afterwards, everywhere, punch in the air. If we lost it, everyone would kind of drift home, and I'd be left there kind of hanging my head, feeling really carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders.
And now, how are you with that now if you win or lose?
Oh, I mean, I'm loads better, but I played tennis at the weekend, and I played appallingly, and I was so down on myself. So it's still there. I can feel elements of it, but I've worked hard on it. I'm much easier on myself. Much
You don't
kinder.
bang the racket and
I don't hurl the racket around. Some of the people I played with do.
Yeah, I know a few like that.
But no, I get it still hurts. It's just that I can be with the hurt now, and I can understand where it comes from.
Yeah.
Which is a real relief, because when I couldn't, it was literally like the world had kind of the ground had kind of collapsed underneath me.
So what was the turning point for you when you were in that advertising career, headhunted, working for an agency, winning all this business? What was going on for you to kind of shift and pivot in your career?
Well, I think that there was an accumulative effect of all of the kind of it was adrenaline fueled, it was caffeine fueled. For lots of people, it was drug and alcohol fueled, and it was exhausting. But
that's the addiction, isn't it? I mean, even if you stop the alcohol, you're still addicted to get your needs met in another way.
Yeah, it's a dopamine-driven world.
So it suited you fine for a time.
It suited me fine whilst it did, but by that time, I was. I was in a relationship. We had a small child, so I wasn't. I was obviously available for the family, and that pulled me out. That got pulled on me much more. So I just didn't have the available energy for it. I was trying to be a good dad. It was very important to me. I really wanted to be a good dad, but I was also working late nights and really stressed. And I think that was the tipping point, was trying to kind of ride those two horses at the same time. It was just a bit too much. And that affected my relationship. And the relationship kind of crashed.
Right.
And so I think, there was a point around, it was probably around 2000, where I'd sort of, the agency was just growing so fast. We were doing really well. This was the agency that I'd been sort of headhunted for, and then back home, I had a 2-year-old, and it was just too much, and I think I just wasn't well suited for that environment. It wasn't good for me. I thought it was. I thought I could handle it, but actually I was way too sensitive. I felt all of the losses and the pain of.
So you're like a sponge, really.
Yeah, I really felt it, and I was really good at disguising it. I don't think anyone would have known.
Yeah,
I think that was
but
my other
inside.
superpower, actually.
It's all inside.
But it was churning me up, and so I sort of really crashed around that time, and I went to see a therapist. And
so, what made you choose to go and see a therapist? What made you? Did someone suggest, or you just thought, no, I'm just going?
Well, I'd had a bit of therapy about sort of 10 years before then, with what I now would understand to be a psychoanalytic therapist, and I didn't really engage with it, and I think it was because it was a bit dry.
What do you mean? Tell me.
Well, I can say that now because I had other experiences to compare it to. But at the time, I thought that's what therapy was.
Yeah.
I guess what I mean by that is it wasn't very lively. It was a bit. He was I think he was sort of typically psychoanalytical, and he sat there. He didn't say very much. He sort of looked at me, what I experienced, of course, through the transference, quite sternly. And I think I just sort of sat there and froze and just sort of, I was back at school, basically. I was back in the headmaster's office, which I spent a fair bit of time in at school. So it just was, that didn't work for me. But then I think I spoke to someone who said, you should think about Gestalt therapy because it's quite different from psychoanalytical therapy. And I hadn't really heard of it. I think I read around a little bit, but really based on very little, I just went in and started to see this guy.
So just for the listeners and viewers, what is Gestalt therapy? We know, but they won't.
Yeah.
Unless they're a therapist.
Well, that's the question every Gestalt therapist hates to be asked because it's such a difficult.
I know.
It's such a difficult therapy to name, to kind of describe. I suppose.
But how is it different then compared to psychoanalysis?
Well, the way I would think of it is it is really about what is happening for you now, and whatever you are bringing from the past, and there was plenty of baggage I was bringing with me. It's with you now, and yes, you can go back and you can look at it, but the only reality you have is what is happening right now. So. And that sounds sort of oversimplistic almost, but it's a very powerful idea. And I think it really resonated with me that I could go back and I could understand everything that happened. And there was a place for that, but it was me, the little boy, was in the chair opposite me. It was immediate, it was experiential. And that resonated so much more strongly than talking about something. So that idea of talking about rather than speaking to. Is very powerful.
It's the past and the present really meeting together in that place, right?
With someone who, is able to hold you in that space, right there with the feelings that may have all their basis rooted in history, but they're actually, you are confronting a part of you in the room now. And I just found that incredibly compelling. I found it exciting. It was kind of revelatory. And after about 2 or 3 sessions, I thought, I want to be you. I want to be in that chair. That's where I'm supposed to be. I'm not supposed to be going back to the agency. I don't know why. It was very strange. But I actually somehow, and probably due to the therapy, I was able to listen to some part of me that said, I can see a path ahead here. If you're a man. There aren't that many male therapists. I knew that at that time because I tried to find one. It was difficult. And you've worked in the kind of fiercely competitive world. I can see how you could be of use to people and help people who come from similar kinds of worlds, which in a way is where I've ended up, I think, in terms of the sort of demographic I'm working with.
Is that what your practice looks like?
A lot, yeah. So I just thought that's it. I want to do this.
So how long did you go into therapy then?
So I was in therapy then for, I suppose, about 3 years.
And still working at the agency.
Working at the agency, and then about a year into that work, I started my training, and I was doing that concurrently with the agency work. And that was tricky because I didn't want to tell anyone because I knew if they knew I was doing it, that'd be right. You're kind of, it's like the footballer whose kind of head's turned by another club. It's like, no, you're. So
that must have been tough because there's loads of essays and commitment.
And just sneaking out of the office. But because I was creative director, I could kind of get away with it. But it was tricky. But I did it. And then when I started the training, again, I just thought, this is it. This is where I'm meant to be. I surprised myself at how adept I was academically because I'd been told most of my life
you were useless.
You were pretty hopeless, and I just remember teachers kind of just despairing really at my inability to focus. But that's the ADHD
the hype,
thing
again,
again, is
the
it?
hype,
Yeah,
if
once
you
you find the thing you like doing,
you excel at it.
I just excelled at it. I really enjoyed it, and so yeah, I that was really the very beginning of this whole chapter really, and slowly I sort of, I mean, I limped along through the advertising world for a few more years, and it got harder and harder, and during that time it was beginning to change a lot from being sort of the old sort of advertising ways were
the
changing
media,
and giving way to social media
yeah.
and the internet, and I just looked at that and thought, I just don't want to do that. That's not for me. I don't want to have to learn a new language. So it all sort of felt like it was conspiring for me to really look at a career change, complete reinvention of myself.
Yeah. So
I just about managed to keep going enough to kind of earn a living to keep me going through the training, which was important because I had by then 2 kids, and still ongoing difficulties in the relationship. So all that was in the background.
That must have been quite tough, juggling everything.
Sure. Yeah, it was really tough. Yeah. I mean, I look back on it now, and I was like, a year on from that, I was writing a master's. I was leaving the agency. I had 2 small kids. I look back on it now, and I think I'm not quite sure how I got through it, but I think I was just so inspired by the training, and that's where. And in a way, my sort of competitiveness came out because I was determined that I was going to finish it and do well at it. And I'm not sure that that's the healthiest sort of basis from which to approach training, but it's what I had, right?
But it becomes the way that you're wired as well, the speed at which you move, the way you know, the standards you set for yourself. So it's difficult just to turn that off, I think. So,
and I think one of the advantages I had was that, having worked in such an intense environment, when we were set tasks and essays and presentations to do, I mean, I would approach them as if they were an advertising pitch. You know, I would go hell for leather. Whereas some of my colleagues who'd probably worked in the public sector, you know, they were much more relaxed about it. But actually, it meant I got through. And I mean, you know, we joked about it as a training cohort quite a lot about my competitiveness. You know, it was intense. Everything I did was done with kind of wholeheartedly and competitively.
And so then for you setting up your private practice, and did you do that relatively quickly, or?
Yeah, I did it really quickly. Yeah. Well, I decided to kind of set myself up as a consultant so I could sort of manage the transition. So I took on some work as a designer and as a kind of creative consultant in an office, which I'd also planned would eventually become a therapy room for me in Regent Street, where I still am now. Like,
so how many years?
15
I
years
think I
later.
remember when
or
you
so.
first were there, you were one of the first therapists there.
Yeah.
And there's about there's loads.
There's
of
loads now. Yeah.
I mean, hundreds.
Yeah, we're all over the place, crawling all over the building. But yeah, it was about 18 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I took that room again, not really knowing exactly how it would play out, and very quickly the advertising work dried up, and
that's when all socials
built a website because I knew how to do that. So I knew how to sort of market myself, which was a great advantage. And I could see where some of my colleagues were probably struggling a bit with that. And I really didn't. And and kind of surprisingly, you know, within a few months, I'd got a handful of clients, and that grew pretty quickly. And then, ambitious as I am, I set up a men's group really quickly after that. So within a year, I'd got a reasonably busy practice. I was running a men's group.
Which is still running.
Which is still running.
What's it called?
It's called, well, the kind of title for it is Opening the Mail.
Okay.
Which I wanted to have a sort of slightly catchy sort of name for it. But I mean, really, it's operated as a men's therapy group for all of that time, and I've loved running it.
If you're enjoying A Bunch of Therapists, why not like, subscribe, and share with a friend?
Simon, can you talk more about why it's important to have men-only spaces. What do those spaces provide that you don't get elsewhere?
Well, I think most men will tell you, and it's something I hear frequently when people first contact me about the group. I think so often the men will say, I'm looking for somewhere where I can come and talk about myself with other men, and where I think that they'll actually want to listen to me, and where I feel like I won't have to pretend. And it kind of sounds like a bit of a cliche, but it is a cliche because it's true that men just don't have those spaces. And I think back to when I joined a men's group, because I joined one before I started one. I'd grown up in a group of men at school, boys at school. We met at, say, 13, 14. And, there were about 8 of us. We still know each other, still friends. But the idea that this kind of competition for a place in the hierarchy of that group by being more outrageous, by impressing your peers, was so intense and the idea that you do not show any vulnerability, because if you do, you're going to end up somewhere lower down in the hierarchy. I mean, it's kind of so primal, isn't it? That's forces behind that. It's extraordinary
really is.
when you think about it.
But it's so sad, isn't it, to think that so many men in particular have to pretend. But then you also know that women feel that same pressure. And then we've got this whole population of people who are walking around pretending to each other because they think they ought to present in a certain way, or they ought to be doing.
But that's the ego, right?
Yeah. And I was working with a male client actually literally just a few days ago who's really struggling, man in his mid-50s, and he was actually there with his partner as a couple. And he said, the thing is, I don't want to come here. I don't want to have to pay you because I don't really like this. I don't like talking because I learned I can deal with it on my own, except the problem is I can't anymore. But I've learned how to manage on my own. So this is like agony for me, coming here and having to be vulnerable with you. I hate it. He's really said that.
Sure. But then, for him, it's like where he had the coping mechanism, I can do this on my own, don't work anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why he's hit the wall, really. And that's what happens, I think, men. They just run out of road. And their coping strategies aren't sufficient anymore. And that's when people often come into therapy.
Yeah.
But I think with men, their coping strategies are often so rigid. They've served them well, but then all it takes is one or two too many pressures, and that will crumble, and then and that's when they roll up into therapy and into groups. And so I found the group has just been a very healing space, really.
So then what? So you built up your practice. You're able to do it with ease, but it's hard,
Yeah. And I think, I was still had the kids, and it was important to be earning reasonably well.
Yeah.
Living in London at that point, and I started to. I sort of felt it was time to spread out and learn more widely, and I think that's when a lot of my kind of adventuring out into other areas started.
How long was it before you started to feel that way?
It's probably about 2 or 3 years, where I think I'd been working, fairly sort of loyally to the Gestalt way, and then. And that's that again, I think that's sort of magpie nature I have, is to go and look and explore and adventure. I've always enjoyed doing that in whatever field I've been sort of interested in. And I think also I am a bit of a seeker. And I that is, it has its good and bad points. But one of the better points about it, I think, was that it meant I wanted to go and explore other areas. So I explored kind of transpersonal and spiritual areas.
Can you explain, we might know what transpersonal is, but some viewers not.
Yeah.
Listeners too.
Well, it's really about what is beyond ego, what is beyond character structure. And I think, as therapists, often what we're doing is helping people who have perhaps haven't had that sort of ego strength that's grown up, where they've been able to know who they are, to be able to understand what they really want and need in the world, and develop a kind of good solid sense of themselves as a person. That's the sort of first stage of the work. But as you go deeper with people, you actually realize that the natural progression then is to want to explore what's beyond ego, which is where all those sort of spiritual and philosophical ideas come from. Buddhism would be an example, where you're really looking at what is beyond, the ego's way of attaching to things, and how the mind then is affected, and thought patterns are affected by our kind of attachment to things. And I just saw it, I guess, as a natural progression. So transpersonal really means beyond the personal. And that opens up that whole sort of realm, spiritual, if you like, realm of what's beyond the ego. And I think, what was so sort of compelling about that was, because I am a sort of restless soul, or at least my ego structure is a restless part of me. An approach that is privileging stillness and listening and sensing, it was very good for me, but incredibly difficult.
I was going to say, was that challenging?
I was suddenly
for you?
so aware of the noise and the kind of activation in me, and but it was very challenging at times to sit with all of that kind of agitation and noise, and the constant kind of internal dialogue that goes on between the various parts of you. But it helped me enormously. And what it's really done as a therapist, I think, is massively deepened my ability to be able to sit with people just as they are, which sounds like such a simple thing to do, but it's incredibly difficult.
It's not, sit for 5 minutes on your own without doing nothing.
Yeah.
It's tough.
It can be very difficult to sit in the room with clients and just be able to be with them where they are.
Without wanting to do
fix them
too much. Yeah. And some clients do need quite a lot. They actually need a lot of energetic input. But I think it comes from a different place when actually I'm able to sit with my own discomfort. So that was in answer to your question, that was a really big part of something I explored that really took me into a new area. And I think it helped me personally, but also professionally.
And so you moved from there, and then constellations come next, or something else?
And then I'm trying to think how constellations showed up. I think it was because the therapist I'd had after the one I started with was very into constellations, and she had been sort of egging me on to go and try one. And it left quite an impact on me. And I'd sort of put in a shelf somewhere in my mind that I'm gonna pull that out at some point. And somehow the time felt right. And I think it was probably also driven by a growing interest in my ancestry.
So say more about that, because not everyone will understand family constellations.
Yeah. Well, I think, I mean, the way it sort of worked through me was that I got to a point where, and I think it happened after COVID, where I was on my own for quite long periods, as we all were, and the kids had sort of gone off and were beginning to sort of fledge, basically, and I suddenly felt this enormous sense of kind of being unrooted, unmoored, and I think it was because without the family there and the kids having flown, I sort of thought, well, what am I really now? I mean, I know I'm a therapist, but that role of getting them out into the world has kind of run its course. And it left this sort of hole, and I felt very uncomfortable. I just felt, as I said, this sort of feeling of untethered. So I started to read around it and around my Jewish ancestry, because I knew very little about it. I think, like many people who sort of heralded from Jewish ancestry, there are secrets.
And so how does it work, the Judaism in your family?
Well, we're not culturally or religious Jews, but my grandfather was a Latvian Jew who fled the pogroms in the sort of late 1800s and was brought, in fact, as a baby. So he was brought by his sister, and they left their parents behind, put on a boat and sent to, and ended up in Sunderland. And I didn't really know much more than that he arrived here and sort of worked his way down the country, and he had my dad, and he was the youngest of four. And I just started to get my dad was sort of dying at this point, and so I think that probably was also what was in the picture, that I had this kind of longing to understand where I came from. So constellations as an approach, which is about really understanding how trauma works in systems that include our ancestral systems. I found that was sort of an obvious place to go, really, and so I began this constellations training 2 years ago.
So with the training and incorporating into your practice, if you can let people know, kind of give them a flavour of what that's like.
Well, if you're in a workshop, you're doing it with representatives, you're doing it with people.
Yeah.
You might have a workshop of, say, 12 or more people, and you'll be working with people who are going to represent aspects of your ancestral story, or it could even be your story now.
Yeah.
And it's a really strange, and it can feel a bit woo, I think, for some people, this idea that if you go and stand and represent, say, someone's grandfather, and all you do is you pay attention to what's happening in you, and what are your impulses, where do you want to move, or what do you want to do, what do you notice about that experience, it's revealing something about the field that is that you just can't get to through a kind of cognitive left brain inquiry. It comes, and it is something that's channeled through a person.
And the person who's, say, I don't know, be in the role of, say, your is it your great grandfather or your grandfather? Grandfather.
Yeah.
They will pick up stuff that you can kind of relate to.
Yeah.
Can you give an example of that in practice?
Yeah, because I've been in family. It is, but for you, maybe you haven't. So
No, I
ask
haven't.
the question.
So let's say you were called to play someone's grandmother, and the story is because the issue holder will be asked to talk through something around the story. They won't go into massive detail, but let's say that you knew enough to know that the grandfather, so your husband, had been killed in the war. You may, and you've had a child, and that child has had the issue holder, has had a child who's the issue holder. So that's your connection, let's say. And it would be not an uncommon response for you to notice that you're turning away from the constellation and from your child and your grandchild, and what the way that would probably be understood, and it would be confirmed by actually bringing a representative to play the dead grandfather, would be that you are so caught in grief for someone who has died that you haven't been able to really attend to your child, and that has ended up as an issue for an issue holder, that there's something that's happened. And if you go deeper, you'll find that the grandfather may have had his own issues before and the whole system sort of opens up. But it's the idea that if there's something that has been is unresolved, or sort of hasn't been fully kind of brought to an emotional head, if you like, hasn't reached some sort of closure or some sort of sense of full acknowledgement, it'll sit there in the system and it will start to show up through the generations.
Because that's where a lot of lies and deceit or lots of things come up, where you have a story.
Yeah.
So you're told a story, I don't know, about the grandmother's side, and this is what happened. But you don't know whether that's true.
Yeah, it's
and then
true
you
through
can
the
bring
perspective of the person telling it, right?
But then if you have the constellation, stuff can come up, and a story opens up even more into something else.
I imagine that way of working is really going to appeal to people who have lost members of their family, or there's huge gaps.
It could be even Holocaust survivors.
Yeah,
and of course that's an area where it's been hugely
massive,
and used.
If you think about your culture of, because yours, was it Kenya and India, what parts?
Yeah, Uganda and Kenya and India.
So with your situation, for instance, you would probably get a representative to say to represent, not play Kenya, for instance. and you would begin to experience, you would begin to find something out about your and your family's relationship to Kenya. And it's as you can imagine, I mean, it's very powerful. It can if you're attending one for the first time, look a little bit. It can feel a little bit kind of woo, a little bit.
I'm up for that. But I see, I lost my mother when I was 13. So this way of working would really call me because there's so many unanswered questions and so many gaps.
And stories.
And stories unheard.
Yeah. What I think why I've decided to sort of really go ahead with it and actually progress to, the advanced level of training is because I've seen the possibility that it opens up work that you just can't get to if you're really certainly in a more left brain kind of way of working, more cognitive. You just can't get there. It opens up what's in the much deeper and deeper field, if you like, of the unconscious.
And do you think because of your experience of running groups, you think you would run more groups, constellation groups?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I mean, I have to watch the competitive part of me that wants to go and, do everything immediately. But I think if I would like to. Yeah, in time. In time. Yeah.
Well, you've got to find the space as well.
And now is a time when I'm trying to just sort of, relax a little bit more into my work.
Even though you lost the tennis at the weekend.
Even though I lost at the weekend.
Do you find it's possible for you to relax completely, like really?
I do actually, yeah. Now I can drop very quickly into sort of stillness. But it's a bit black or white. I'm either quite intensely involved in something or else I can be very, very relaxed. I think my struggle is to be able to bring more of that into my kind of everyday life.
Sure.
And just go around things more. I mean, really just more with a little bit more presence, a little bit more slowly.
Well, I've loved this conversation. We've gone to a few different places. And for any of our viewers and our listeners, what would you like them to know or perhaps take from this conversation, or even a piece of wisdom that you've learned on your journey?
Oh, wow. That's a biggie.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that there's sort of two, if I can have two.
Please,
and they're connected. I mean, one is, I think it's probably what most therapists would say is the biggest problem that we encounter with people is self-criticism. So I think, finding compassion and kindness for ourselves is and for me has been a hugely healing part of the journey. And I don't think one can overstate that really. I mean, I think most issues that people come with boil down one way or another to lack of compassion. I think the thing I've learned is that, we are desperate for certainty. We are, I think I read somewhere, we are the descendants of the paranoid because they're the ones who survived. We are kind of phobic about uncertainty, but the reality is life is uncertain. And I think if you can find ways to sort of embrace that with kindness to yourself, but actually really embrace, because that's where the mystery of life becomes apparent, is when we can sort of enjoy the fact that we don't know. And I think that's where the kind of mystery resides, in that sort of ability to sit in the not knowing, which is very much a right brain thing.
But when you go into the not knowing, then you find something else that you become interested in.
Exactly.
And you know about that. If everything's all calculated, it just doesn't work.
Yeah. So I would say, embracing uncertainty with kindness to yourself.
That's very powerful.
Yeah,
And
brilliant.
that resonates deeply. Thank you so much for coming in today. It's been a real pleasure to speak with you.
Oh, you're welcome. I've enjoyed it.
Great.
Yeah.
That's what we want.
Yeah.
You've been listening to A Bunch of Therapists with me, Michaela McCarthy, and Dipti Solanki.
And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to review, like and subscribe to wherever you listen to your podcasts. And do follow us on our socials. Until next time, see you soon.